my father decided that's it, we're done. So we stopped going to church, except for Christmas and Easter, because that's kind of the rule, you have to go. But at the same time, I knew God was there somewhere. I grew up in a small town in Maryland, right on the DC line. You know, I'm 11, 12 years old, and I just kind of felt like I should be in church. As I grew older, that's when things kind of started to change. I started beginning the cycle of abuse and addiction. Started with smoking pot and things, but it progressed. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I was using PCP and LSD regularly. And going to church and using drugs kind of didn't feel like a good fit. So I guess you could say I opted to get high and not go to church. My addiction was quite progressed into my late teens, 19, 20, 21. Life was just depressing. Even though I had met my wife, I just felt like life wasn't worth living any longer, and I knew something was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But at the same time, I knew I had to have a job, and I knew that I had to be responsible because I had a wife. And so I just wasn't to the point where I was laying in the street with my addiction. But after work, I would use the harder drugs. During work, I'd get high on just marijuana, and that was pretty much every day for me. One night I came home, and I lived in a third-story apartment, and so I crawled up the stairs to the apartment because I couldn't walk. And I had been strung out for some time, and my body was beginning to crash. When I got home, my wife was there, and she said to me, "What's wrong with you?" And that was no strange experience to her. She was very familiar to seeing me messed up, but she knew this time was different. She goes, "Tell me, what's wrong?" And I said, I cannot go on living like this any longer. I had tried to commit suicide several months before we got married, and God was there. God was there many times when I should have died. What happened is I had just decided if I wasn't going to find what was missing, I didn't want to live. So I told my wife, I said, tomorrow's Easter Sunday. Why don't we get up and go to church? And my wife, she considered herself a backslidden Christian. And so she said, okay, we'll get up and go to church, but we're not going to your church. Your church is boring. If we're going to go to church, we're going to my church. So we got up and we went to her 5,000 member Pentecostal church on Easter Sunday morning. And it was very busy, and it was a celebration for sure. While he was talking, my heart was stirring, and I knew that was what is missing from my life. And he said, would anyone here like to give their life to Christ? And I shot up out of my chair, and my wife went with me, and we walked down, and that day, that was it. It was a 180-degree turn for me. The drugs were gone. The lifestyle was gone. I poured myself into the Bible and learning everything I could about Jesus and what it meant to be his follower, and God led me the whole way. My wife gave her heart that day as well, and that was Easter Sunday, 1987. It was a dramatic day for me and for my wife. It was the beginning of a new experience.